to the In-Between Whoa! Welcome to the In-Betweenman podcast, where men can be men. And today, we are going to be talking about statements that I believe men tell themselves to convince themselves that they shouldn't be emotionally vulnerable and or share any emotions or any childhood trauma. Okay? So if you can identify with some of these statements that I've come up with on my own, these are my own personal statements that I believe men say to themselves to carry the load, right? To carry the load that they can handle all of the stress, all of the financial stress, all the anxiety, all the fear, all the PTSD symptoms, all the things that run through their head that they've convinced themselves that they're supposed to be able to handle. And what I mean by carrying the load is, in yesterday's video, I talked about carrying around a backpack that we start off, maybe after college with a backpack that when we take emotional zingers or we have trauma, instead of knowing or having a process to work through what those are, we take that zinger and we'll use the example of having a rock and we just put it in our backpack. And every day we get up, we put our backpack on because that's part of our job, and we carry around 10 pounds of rocks. And as the decades go on, at least for me it did, it gets to a point where I can no longer carry the load. And I get to a place where I was. So, this is here to help you maybe identify with statements that I've told myself that you can relate to, that confirm that you're not willing to share any emotions at all. Okay? Remember, like I said yesterday, this podcast is about answering the question of why men are struggling today. And I think this is a real dynamic, and we'll go into some of those details here in this podcast through actual data that was shared by Scott Galloway. That's a couple years old, to be candid. But let me start off with the first statement, okay? So I would say to myself, I would seriously consider hurting myself first before I ever became willing to share my emotions and or childhood trauma. My question to you is, can you identify with that statement? You don't have to, but can you identify with it? And I'm going to be saying this a lot because I got about 9 different examples that I'm going to share with you. Okay? Here's another statement that I've made to myself while going through this trauma, working through this trauma. My actions that I've done to myself and to other people are unforgivable. And I do not believe I deserve to be forgiven for any of it. Right? Like, one of the things I was really good at is projecting my own anger and frustration at other people that I loved and I care about. So not only did I personally harm myself, but part of the harms that I would do would have a direct impact on the people I loved the most. That's how much I hated myself. Okay? The third statement is, I hate the person that I've become. Can you identify with that statement? If you can, good. If you can't, that's okay. This isn't a pass fail. But if you can identify with, I hate the person I've become, That's something to take a look at. Okay? Here's another statement that I've said to myself. Real men don't ever show signs of physical or emotional weakness. If they do, they aren't real men. They're pussies. Again, to keep the emphasis on the fact that being emotionally stoic is a positive thing for men. And it's not. Okay? It is 100% okay to talk about your emotions and to talk about your feelings in any capacity, hopefully with the right person. Now, if you've said this to yourself, that's great. If you can't identify with this statement, that's fine too. Drinking or doing drugs is my only form of relief, mental relief. But I hate myself when I'm drinking and using drugs. Because what ends up happening is you're not working through anything and you're just more miserable, right? So can you identify with that statement? If you can, that's good. If you can't, no worries. Here's another statement. If I can't solve my own problems on my own, then no one can. My problems are so unique and so different that I'm incapable of sharing them with other people because I haven't figured out a way to solve the problem. And all that does is isolate you from other people and asking for help. That's what it did for me. It may not do that for you. Okay? Now, this goes back to my original statement before I started, which is real men carry the load. Anxiety, stress, mental health, depression, financial stress are all the things that I can control on my own. I will carry the load. I will just keep putting rocks in the backpack because that's my job. That's my job as a man. Okay? And then I got two more. These are statements that I've said to myself. The shame and judgment I could receive from my friends and loved ones is my primary source of my fear for not sharing any of my emotional trauma or emotional pain. I am too fucking terrified of what the real consequences will be because I know they're bad. I know no one's going to like them, and it's going to make me feel worse than I already feel right now. Does that make sense? If you can identify with this, great. If you can't identify with it, that's fine too. All right. Then the last one that I got is my personal value as a man is solely based on my ability to provide financially as a man. My emotions are never considered in my evaluation process. Right? So society has created this definition of what a successful man is, and that's providing a house, providing financial stability, providing cars, everything that is outside of themselves, tangible objects. And I thought for a really, really, really long time that I was only being valued in that way and nothing else mattered. So if you can identify with that, even better, right? So, again, I'm making these statements for you because I have said them for myself. If you can identify with one of these, then you might be in a spot where you're in enough discomfort or you're in enough pain to know that it is 100% okay to get this stuff out of your body, to talk about these things, because harming yourself is not ever a viable option. And the first one I said was, I would seriously consider hurting myself first before I ever became willing to share my emotions and or childhood trauma. Okay? And what happens with men is over the years, decades, it takes a lot of pain to get to that point. And yes, I have thought about deep throating a pistol and pulling the trigger, or giving a shotgun a blowjob. But I was too afraid to do it. Like, I've got 3 boys. I just can't imagine them coming home and seeing that mess for me. And I didn't want to put them through that. So I had to find another way, and I did. So I also want to talk about some data that our good friend Scott Galloway has provided to us. And I can't recall what podcast I heard this from. Scott is incredibly articulate, and I'm getting a phone call. I will decline it because this is much more important than that. And some of it may be a little bit old, some may be a little outdated, but I think that these are, 10 things that are happening today that speak to some of the statements that I just previously made. And the data that Scott Galloway highlights is why men are struggling. Again, it's data. So it's telling you that they're struggling, but it doesn't really tell you why. I mean, let me just get to it. So, suicide rates. Men are 4 times likely to die by suicide than women. Since 1999, if male suicide rates match those of women, over 500,000 men would still be alive. That's a lot of men. That confirms for me just how unwilling men are able to accept that they struggle with emotional challenges. Okay. Addiction. Men are 3 times more likely to suffer from addiction compared to women, contributing significantly to the deaths of despair crisis. And we'll go more into that going forward. So 3 times more likely. Men are 3 times more likely to harm themselves before they become willing to share their emotional pain. Incarceration rates. Men are 12 times more likely to be incarcerated than women, reflecting systemic issues in education, employment, and societal expectations. Okay? A lot of these education, employment, and societal expectations have changed now that we're living in a woke world. And many of us men never saw it coming. So we're having to adapt and change to new narratives that we never saw coming and never were prepared for. So it makes perfect sense why incarceration rates have gone up in men. And men are 10 times more likely to be incarcerated than women. The education gap. Boys enter school less prepared than girls and are less likely to graduate from high school or college. By age 27, high school dropouts are 4 times more likely to face issues like unemployment, addiction, incarceration compared to their peers who do graduate. Okay? Scary numbers there. There's other data that falls within this gap that he hasn't mentioned, like biologically, women are developmentally more mature than men just because of their biological makeup, but I don't want to get lost off on a tangent. Social isolation. 1 in 7 men reports having no close friends, contributing to the feelings of loneliness and alienation. I can 100% raise my hand there and say yes. Okay. Relationships. Only 1 in 3 men under 30 years of age is in a romantic relationship compared to 2 in 3 women. This disparity is partly due to economic and emotional viability being key factors for women when choosing partners. Okay? This disparity is partly due to economic and emotional viability being the factors that women are choosing when they see a man. They can choose whoever they want, but that's legit. Now we're going to get into deaths of despair. 3 out of every 4 deaths of despair, suicide or drug overdose, in America are men, underlining the severe mental health crisis. We have workforce participation decline. There has been a sharp decline in workforce participation among men, exacerbating financial instability and social disengagements. Economic viability. Many young men struggle with financial independence as fewer men can comfortably support a family on their income alone, a significant shift from traditional male roles. Okay? And then we have the impact of technology. Scott Galloway has highlighted how AI-driven technologies and social media exacerbated social isolation and disengagement among young men, reducing real-world relationships and responsibilities. So like for today, I'm not going out and hanging out with friends and going to the quarry and going swimming. I'm sitting at home, I'm isolating, I'm doing this podcast, but I feel like I'm doing something productive. So that's a little bit different. So these statistics reflect a broader crisis of masculinity and societal shifts that disproportionately affect men, particularly young men, across multiple dimensions of life. And that's it. So today I just wanted to highlight, 9 statements that I have said to myself, confirming the reasons why I should not share my emotions and any trauma with anyone. And 2, the data that Scott has shared that is confirming, right, based on the data, how men are responding to not being willing to do that, right? I mean, there are so many factors outside of men that is causing this question of why men are struggling today. And there's so many things that individually men aren't willing to do because they've been told for so long that sharing your emotions is a sign of weakness and are in fear of shame and judgment from others when they recognize and see how much harm you've done to yourself and how much your harm has affected other people. Okay? So this is going to be a quick podcast today, just outlining the fact that if you can identify with some of the statements that I made in the beginning of this podcast, I want you to understand that you're not alone and that I get it, okay? And that there is no legitimate reason to hurt yourself, okay? That's not an option, even though it may feel like one. It's not, okay? And I believe that one of the traits of what real men do, which is not often defined in the traditional male value system, is to work through complicated dynamics like this and know that it's okay. We have not been taught how to deal with our emotions. We have not been taught how to effectively communicate how we're feeling in a way that helps us work through whatever emotions we're going through, emotional pain, mental health, depression, things of that nature. Okay. And as a matter of fact, we've been told for centuries not to do it. So there's a reason why it's taking so long. And there's a reason why we continue to carry the load, because we believe that our job is that we need to be able to manage all of those criteria: stress, anxiety, mental health, wartime trauma, if you're a veteran, all of those things on our own. And if we can't, then we're not a man. And I'm telling you that that's a lie. I want you to hear that it's okay to be terrified and scared of getting this stuff out, because it's not as simple as just sharing. We've been carrying this shit around for a long time, and we've become incredibly toxic because of the toxicity of it all. And you were told not to share it. I was told not to share it. I'm telling you now to share it, because I did. And my podcast yesterday helped you see that DJ Shipley did, and miracles can happen. And you deserve, okay? You absolutely are entitled to be forgiven for anything that you've done, whether it be by me, whether it be by your peers, whether it be by the universe itself. Okay? You can and will be forgiven. Okay? And that's contingent on many factors. But the goal is to face them and to see them and to accept what those consequences could be and not run away from them and to attack them. Just like you would if you were just putting rocks back in your backpack. It takes a lot of work to do this stuff, and it's not easy. And real men do this. And you're a real man, you just haven't been taught. I believe that. And it can happen over time. Okay? So that's it. I'm not going to share anything else with you guys today. I'm going to simply tell you that I'm grateful that you listened today. I'm grateful that you tuned in. Don't share it with any of your friends. That's a sign of being vulnerable. Don't like it. Again, another sign of showing weakness. And keep it all to yourself, right? Of course, I'm kidding. But that's all I got for now. I'll see you in there, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a great day, everybody.